Hello, welcome to the Spaceship Earth Mission Log podcast. I'm here with Della Burford, whose project is Earth Action, and she is a absolutely amazing artist and has written multiple books. And so this project features around a specific book that you were working with a group. Did you end up getting people on your mission to help you with the project?
Yes, the Earth Action has been twice in the space camp. The first time where I was sort of developing the ideas, and it came from a picture book called Magical Earth Secrets that I wanted to have a activity book to go with it, and I had developed one years ago, but it wasn't updated information. So yes, a few people worked with me. One is William Meyerhoff. He's a great architect that gave me lots of ideas, and he included actually some really great geometric shapes in the book that became activities where kids could make geometric forms, like the tetrahedron was one, for example, gumdrop tetrahedron, and there's the geosphere. So he was helping me with that. And then also Peter Meislin helped me in the first space camp a lot. And he has developed like something on the internet called Genie, and it's checking out alternative energy sources all over the world. And I developed a game called the World Energy Game that's in the book.
Very cool. I'm going to ask you a lot about the book, but where I'd like to start with today's interview is your connection to Buckminster Fuller. I think we're going to
Oh,
talk a lot about that because I think that'll actually help ground the conversation for this group and for us. We had a bit of technical difficulties getting into the call, so apologies for the sound, but we're going to just, connect over your lovely work. And I was extremely impressed when I looked at Dodoland's website that you have and all of the many exhibitions that you've done. So obviously you're very, very inspired by Buckminster Fuller. Tell me more about that connection.
yeah, that's a cool thing. My first book was published in 1977 in Los Angeles. And at that time, I was doing workshops and leading workshops for children in Los Angeles. And I went to something called the Humanistic Psychology Conference. And who was there but Buckminster Fuller? And he was speaking. And I was in a front row listening to him. And all of a sudden, when he was speaking, his whole body disappeared. And he was just a bright white light, and he became the cosmos basically at that moment to me. And
Incredible.
yeah, so that had a tremendous effect on me, and I decided that I was going to really listen to his philosophy and what he had to say. And one of the things that he does say, of course, is that you should he had an experience where he saw a white light, and he was having problems in his life, and all of a sudden was told that he's not you're not you are the cosmos, you are more than yourself. And so I kind of based my whole career around that, and based around the idea that you should do work for humanity. He was told at that time as well, you should do work for humanity. And he started to change his whole drift on what he did. He didn't care about exactly all the money. It was doing it for humanity. And my work in my career has been for humanity.
Your paintings depict energy and energy centers and the sort of a reflection, I think. Was that the first experience you'd have like that, like seeing someone just transfigured?
Well, at that time in California, I was having a few of those. And one of them, I had another one with um, well, there was different people, like Elizabeth Kubler-Ross was another one, and another one was well, there was Tibetan monks that had
You
the
studied
same.
with Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche, if I
Right.
am correct.
I studied the dream yoga, yeah,
Amazing.
and I just did a meditation this morning with them, actually. But yeah, my paintings are. many energy centers are shown. Like, for instance, this is the Crystal Wish, who is one of the main characters in the book of the Magical Earth Secrets. When I was developing the story of Magical Earth, I went into all the chakras of the body and depicted them in little with little people of the rainbow, and they became part of this story. And then when Earth Action was created, they also were transferred over to Earth Action. So the little people of the rainbow, which represents the centers of the body, are shown in the Earth Action book. And they represent the elements: the earth, the water, the air, the sun, the stars. And so each of the chapters of the book goes into each of those aspects as well.
That's incredible. And, to ground the chakra system for those who may be a little more empiricist, because I know science has had a hard time connecting the chakras with any kind of empirical evidence. When I was at the chiropractor, I was looking at a chart of the nerve centers, both the sympathetic and parasympathetic. If you look at where the nerve centers come out of the spine and toward the front of the body, they actually line up perfectly with the traditional chakra system. I think there's like one extra one, and it's pretty incredible. And I was working on a podcast for my other podcast, The Language of Creativity, where she's talking about an open heart and studying the Heart Math Institute from an artistic perspective. And what she says is that like your emotions, you feel them in your body, you feel them in different places. I mean, if you feel like you were punched in the gut when someone says something terrible, or like you have a frog in your throat, or you just feel cloudy headed, all of those things, all those mental things correspond in the physical body. So there is an innate mind-body connection. And as you and I probably know, there is a beyond connection that goes beyond our own physical field into the greater field. So we are connected to the all that is. We're we're linked, just like the biosphere is linked. Everything's part of this web of life. Tell me a little bit more about that experience, because I'd really love to ground that part of the conversation for all the sciencey folks out there, because I know we've touched upon those kind of things before.
Well, actually, I've been totally into the chakras for decades, and it all started when I went to India. I actually had an experience of a type of a cancer that wasn't too bad, but it was cancer. And when I went to India, I was into the healing mode, and I discovered the chakras. And of course, India, I mean, what can you do? You're in India.
Thousands of years of spiritual tradition that is very deeply woven with Vedic medical knowledge.
Oh, yeah.
3,000 or 4,000 of years of knowledge. Yeah.
Yeah. And I ended up creating something called Wise Lotus One in India, and it became part of Dodo Land. And it was the Wise Lotus One that gave the secret to go home from the land. But that was the beginning of doing the study on the chakras. And a lot of my stories go into the chakras because I think they are based, of course, in the physical body, but it's more than that. It's your emotions, it's your feelings, it's your aura, it's your connection to the universe. It's all of these things.
And your aura is just your field, and you can imagine your magnetic field, which we do project. That is part of heart math. The heart has a magnetic field 4 times larger than the brain. And so we all have a field. And if you doubt that, just stand next to someone in line and notice when they're looking at you or standing close to you, right?
Yeah, that's right. Oh, yeah, it's pretty fascinating. It's certainly been one of the things that has been embedded into my stories and my work, my whole career, really. And I actually work with children and adults on developing their own chakra pictures and stories around that, and lots of different things like that.
So how is that knowledge about the elements and the chakras embedded into your story about the earth? Because you make a connection to this knowledge is very important to knowing how to care for our world.
Absolutely. It came to me when Magical Earth Secrets was published by the Western Canada Wilderness Committee that I could incorporate the feeling of the chakras into loving the earth. So when I've got, for instance, the earth seed, and I've got the wheel of the seasons and the wheel of the food chain, and the waste not wheel, not wasting things, it always connected to the element of the earth and the trees and taking care of the animals. And so that became part of the activities in the guide. Like, for instance, we got one thing on upcycling and another thing on doing an endangered animal poster, all this sort of stuff. But, and then in the water section, I've got the water chakra represented by who's called Sweetwater. And then I've got lots of activities that are love the water activities and water dances and 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 it seems to me, our love for the water comes from uh, really identifying with love from the heart chakra, but also identifying with the flow of life, and that we are part of the flow of life. But when I was doing the book of Earth Action, I was thinking about, okay, how can we protect the water? And like in our class in the space camp this time, I was really impressed with, the things that Brian Von Herzen was saying
Me too.
about
Yeah.
permaculture and how important it was in terms of climate change and taking care of the ocean and the carbon sinks and the work he's doing in creating those seaweed gardens. And what I wanted to do with the guide this time when I was in space camp was incorporate not only should we love the trees and we want to plant trees, but there's more than that.
Yes.
There's more than that we have to do. And that's what I tried to incorporate in the guide now. And so for the water, I got into doing a poster on marine restoration and looking at that whole aspect of things. So going through, there's the solar power, of course, and air. There's stopping climate change by doing other things like going into not using pesticides, agricultural stuff like not using, I think the One Earth, I was really impressed with what um, Carl was saying from the One Earth about how we can do three things to help climate change. One is agricultural, using restorative agriculture, like no pesticides or no fertilizer. So I included that in the Earth section, and then I included in the Star section, which is connected to the energy again. I included the renewable energy, which was another thing that Carl went into, which is so important in trying to help climate change, is using solar power and using water power and using geothermal energy and using all these alternatives. And of course, in the space camp as well was Peter Bison, who's the expert on this. I mean, he has created Genie, which is the internet site for showing the alternative energy sources all over the world. And so I sort of was talking with him in both camps, the last one I was in and this one, and I created the Dymaxion map, of course, is part of it, but I created something called the World Energy Game Collage, and it's based around the Genie work because it's so important to use the alternative energy sources. Why are we burning all this fossil fuel and polluting the air when we can be using our own energy? So it's connected to energy. Everything is connected to energy, and it's all connected to the elements: the water, the earth, the sun, the stars, too.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, the medicine wheel is interesting because, it does go around in a circle, and it includes the earth, the
Right.
water. I don't have them in order. The earth, the water, the air, and the fire. And the fire is
Right.
the sun. And
That's
so
our
all of
society.
these things have to be in balance. It's like we can't
Yeah.
just put solar panels everywhere. Like we can't cover
No.
every square inch of the earth in solar panels. We know from Kiss the Ground and other, obviously other sources that the soil is essential for life, and also the plants. So the earth, you have the earth, and then you mentioned the
Mm-hmm.
water, and so
Right.
we really have to think a whole systems view of
Absolutely.
energy. And so you're right,
Mm-hmm.
contained and in the middle is spirit. And so
Mm-hmm.
all of the elements of the medicine wheel are in a wheel, and they're part of the circle of
Yes.
totality. And
Yeah.
so can you tell me a little bit more about the game that you created?
Yeah. That was fun to do. I was inspired by Peter Meisen and the work he's doing with the world, with the world, of course, energy games that Buckminster Fuller has created this incredible thing, where you look at the alternative energies in the world, but you also look at peace. I mean, he went into peace as well. Where in the world can you start to bring in peace? And so what I've got this Buckminster Fuller world game. It works for one person or a group, and for instance, if it's done in a classroom, each child chooses a country, and that country, they do research on how that particular country is producing and consuming energy in their country, and then they write a little bit about it and do a picture of it, and they do a big global map in the world on the classroom wall, and that becomes the World Energy Game collage for the classroom. But every child contributes something about a country. They can get all the information from the Genie website, and so it's the resources there. It's just learning about it more and it becoming an educational objective.
So the game is a class participation art exercise.
Yes, that's
Now,
right.
let's go into art a little bit more, because that's your domain. And it
Right.
seems like you're really doing a lot of impactful work through art. So, can we share a little bit more about maybe how you got into art, but also how you've used art to inspire change, such as the game?
Oh yeah, arts, creating and using the arts is really what I do, and what I encourage others to do. Everything that I've done in terms of my whole career in doing this is maybe me just starting as a source of a seed, and then it becomes taken by a musician or taken by a theater company or taken by an animator and become something that they can share with the world. For example, the Magical Earth Secrets has been performed in New York City before it was a book, and a whole group in New York, a whole production group, got involved. Um,
Wow.
after the Dodeland book was performed for 7 years in New York. This book was performed for 2 years. Then it was taken to Edmonton to a dance company there called Maria Formola. She did a beautiful production. Um, People have used puppets, they've used dance, they've used costumes. Just recently, it was performed in Japan for 7 years as a theater production. I'm usually involved, and I encourage all the artists to do the work. And so it's kind of fun, and for me too. But and I have a couple of stories, like right now, another story called Star Galaxy for the World. Miracle Galaxy is being performed in Japan. So, quite often when people do my work, artists, they then choose another story and do that too, which is kind of fun.
Well, it's great on
Yeah.
your Dodoland website. Put it in the show notes. The video that you made of that with Stroopy's
Oh,
music. It's
it's
just so
beautiful.
wonderful.
Oh,
Yeah, so
yeah,
go
I got
check
to
that out. It's
talk.
the very top.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Talking about artists. That was part of the design science program, which I was part of for a
Design
year.
Science Studio, yes.
Design science studio was part of that for a year, and I got to meet some wonderful artists. Of course, it's just totally amazing. But Julian Ramirez, who I worked with the design science studio, he took my story of Star Galaxy for the World and made it into an animated film.
Hmm.
And it's a 4.5 minute film. It's been shown at a peace festival in Colombia called I Am Peace. It's been shown to the artists who were involved in the Miracle Galaxy in Japan in this last summer. So it gets around. Stroopy did the music, which is totally
He did a
beautiful. And
fantastic
oh,
job. He
just
played
an
like 7 wind
yeah.
instruments on it.
Oh yeah, totally beautiful. And
Yeah.
my brother Freeman did the my voice in that, and he really did a beautiful job, I think, of
Yeah.
that. And he's so talented. And so musicians have been part of what I do too. Like in the Earth Action book, I did. I have all these wheels of life. I call them the wheels, nature wheels, and I have a song about them. How one becomes into the other, becomes into the other. And
Mm.
Virgil Scott in Toronto did a recording of the idea of one wheel connected to another wheel, connected to another wheel, connected to another wheel, and they're all
Yeah.
connected to the same wheel. It's all one big circle.
It's all one
It's
big wheel, and there's all
it's
these
all
little
one big
wheels, and
yeah,
I'm a wheel, and you're a
yeah.
wheel, and we're a wheel together. And
We're
then Buckminster Fuller Institute
exactly
community is a wheel within all that we're in.
yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah, we're all wheels, and we are all wheels, and the world is a wheel. And if we can realize that, and realize that everything is connected, you cannot separate one thing from the other. It's all one, and
yeah.
That's part of the big philosophy in Earth Action. And
Let's
John Van Meter, I don't know whether you know him. He did a fabulous video of Earth Action, which was presented with the Design Science Studio as well.
Let's talk about your collaborators and this particular iteration of the project. I know you said William Meyerhoff. I've met him. He's incredible. Was one of your
Right.
collaborators. Tell me about from the start of Trim Tab on climate change and your project. Tell me how this round went with your project. What were your goals and objectives? How did you collaborate with people? What improvements were made on your book?
Well, my main thing, I get very inspired by a lot of the speakers that are there.
Mhm.
And so I incorporate their information that I'm learning from them into the book. As I mentioned, with Brian and his whole marine thing, and then also Carl and Peter Meisen and there's just so many people that were part of that group that inspired me in one way or another to include another art activity or another music activity or you can go into a lot of different ideas of people involved. Of course, Faith Flanagan has been a great supporter of my Earth Action, and she encouraged me when I was first doing it to really work on this, and she's been such a force of making this happen.
Is the Earth Action book different than the prior book in any way? Like, how do they contrast?
Oh, the first Earth Action, it wasn't called Earth Action, it was called the Environmental Activity Guide, and it was actually written really decades ago, because so some of the information wasn't up to date.
Hmm.
But it's really surprising how much of it is similar. But it's just this is a more updated version. Um, that I think that I'm trying to use a little bit of the technology of today to get the message across as well. Like in the Design Science Studio, it was really fabulous because I got to work with, of course, Julian Ramirez, an animator, but also I created two Topia worlds, and
Cool.
one is Dodo Land, and in
Uh
Dodo
huh.
Land you can actually see the Earth Action book there. And
Wow.
then I created another world called Star Galaxy for the World, which goes into ways of being that you have to be to make this world work as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, Utopia was a wonderful experience when I did the first Design Science Studio Salon. And I
Right.
was kind of blown away by how so many artists had created this world in two-dimensional drawing that you could walk around and
Yeah.
interact with people and have the
Yeah.
vision train and all that stuff. It's really
Yeah.
neat.
Yeah.
I mean, did you see any kind of moving forward of world systems change through Design Science Studio? Like, tell me where maybe practically you've seen how art shifts perspectives in the real world.
Well, for me, it did because, of course, I was in the design science studio last year, and COVID was in fledged, right?
Yeah.
And I couldn't do a lot of my storytellings that I usually do, or there wasn't as many performance events. But with the people that were in the design science studio that were technically really, you know, um, being able to do things, I got to do the. I got to learn about Topia and do a Topia world. I got to work with Julian and do an animation, and I find that being open to those other ways of communication has made it possible for my work to get to a broader audience than I ever would have expected before.
Yeah. But books are still extremely relevant. And I love that you have so many books. And I love that you're working
Hmm.
with children in
Hmm.
those books. I think the children of today and the very young adults of today are a lot different place with they just kind of don't understand why we wouldn't take care of the planet. It's
Oh
like,
yeah,
of course,
oh yeah, yeah.
and so, I mean, have you gotten the
Yeah.
chance to interact with children around your book? Have you gotten a chance to see their reaction to the paintings
Yes.
and the
Oh yeah, for
stories?
sure. It's funny you should say that because I worked with a group in Toronto for 17 years and I went out to schools. I visited probably 300 schools. So I saw a lot of children. I think the children have made it possible for me to realize what it is that needs to be said and how it needs to be said. But
Mm.
right now, I'm doing a project right now with a school called Departure Based School. They're an eco school. And the children in the classroom that I'm working with right now are in grade 4. But yes, they're really concerned about the environment. And
Very. Yes.
it's not something that they don't really feel deeply about, and they want to do whatever they can. And so it's really great. We're going to be doing posters with this group, which will be posters of the different activities in the guide. Some of them of this latest climate change direction that I've taken in the guide, and they're really keen kids. I did a project, I guess, 2 months ago with Call to Earth, which is a CNN project that is
Oh, wow.
international.
Very cool.
It's all over the world. It's international. And I did a project at Departure Bay with the students, and it was about protecting the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole theme was
Super
protecting
important.
the ocean. And they had students from, from Africa. They had students from India. They had students from Hong Kong. They had students from all over involved in the projects that they're doing. Some of them cleaning up the ocean, collecting plastic from the ocean. Um, the many, many ways that contributions are being made. But the students that I worked with, I had them create what was called ocean painting, where they
Mm.
actually created a painting that was using the water of the ocean and letting it flow. And as it
Oh.
flowed, then um, put their favorite sea creature in the water. And it was fun. We had fun doing that. My husband worked with me on that, Dale Bertrand, as well. So
Now,
I try to continue all the time to come
yeah.
up, be way open to new ideas.
Now, how did you start painting?
My mother was a painter, and she taught me painting at a very young age. And painting was just something I did so naturally because I was taught when I was so young. And of course, when I went to design school, etc., the art and putting things together graphically became really fascinating to me too.
Yeah. And what medium do you paint?
I paint in watercolor
Mm-hmm.
and also in acrylic,
Mm-hmm.
usually water based. I was
Yeah.
trained in the Meech technique in Austria, um, but I learned it with oil colors as well as acrylic.
Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering if you would be willing to share about your experience that you studied with a shaman who studied with Jung.
Oh, oh, that's funny. Yeah, well, that's a long, long story.
Well, we have time.
But
We have 30 minutes.
oh,
I
okay,
really want to kind of dive deep into this interconnection because I feel like some people are
yeah,
reaching out for this kind of sense of the grander circle, that we all have access to. Jung believed in the transpersonal unconscious. So, in other
right.
words, like you can connect to the collective unconscious. He had a vision when he was riding on a train. This is Jung through Europe right before the Great War, and he saw what was going to happen. He had this flash of like this terror, and it turned out like 2 years later they were engulfed in a world war. And
Right.
so a lot of his theories of the soul and the psyche he based around a meditation work that he did that included painting, where he painted what he was seeing in his unconscious. He'd go in and delve into
Hmm.
these visions that he was having, and he painted. And that's what helped Jung develop all the theories scientifically. So he took the
Hmm.
art side and the soul traveling side and then turned it into science and was able to utilize that to move psychology forward by leaps and
Well,
bounds. So I want
yeah,
to explore this connection.
yeah. It's a big connection for me. I really paint from my dreams,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of my paintings come from my dreams. And I have these totally amazing dreams, and have for a very, very long time. Um, I guess most of my life, and I end up painting the images that come to me, and sometimes these images have come through trauma, actually, and then they develop into, like when I went to India, for example. I told you I had cancer, and when I went to India, I came up with a book called Journey to a Lotus, and the Journey to a Lotus was about finding, in fact, the essence in the end of the fact that we are at one with everything. And but that came through my dreams that were happening to me at that time as well. And as far as a shaman goes, I've been very fortunate to have worked with a number of shamans. One such shaman was the one you mentioned that worked. He was a student of Carl Jung's, and so he really understood my dreams. And he didn't ever tell me what a dream meant. He just would visit me in my dreams. and, and he ended up visiting me, for instance, at one instance, and he said, "Oh, see that over there, the colors? You can change the colors, you know."
Whoa.
So he would plant all these seeds in my mind that I could become more lucid,
Mm-hmm.
and I ended up being able to change colors and being able to remember more and all sorts of things, but it was done in a very unusual way. And he ended up actually helping me when Magical Earth Secrets was uh, being performed in New York before it was a book. He helped me with he came and we did a lot of ceremony, and he helped me to design the costumes for the performers. And
Mm.
he said that it was very important that the performers could move in the costumes, not that they looked a certain way, but that they could actually have movement. And
Right.
he also played the drum, and he had one of the performers in New York, for instance, enter the stage for the Magical Earth Secrets, playing a song which was called the children's song that came through him in ceremony, and she was playing the drum. So we included a lot of things that were actually things that came to me and to him in ceremony, and my husband. My husband was very involved too,
Mm.
and we were incorporating it in the productions. And this is the way I learned from him. that you actually can do ceremony, and the ceremonies can become part of your paintings, and the ceremonies can become part of the theater production, and the ceremonies can become part of the music, because it is all connected. It's not just something physical, it's something more than that, that you
Mm-hmm.
can learn from and then you incorporate it into your work. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that was a very meaningful experience. I still do medicine wheels constantly that I incorporated into the development of my projects. I've got 3 going right now, actually. And I light candles, do, some ceremonies are Peruvian, some are Mexican, some are Tibetan, some are, different cultures that I've been influenced by. And I do the ceremony and then I see what comes. And incredible dreams come to me. I've written a book called Dream Wheels, which has got actually about 49 years of dreams that I've recorded.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. You mentioned movement, and I think we often forget of the importance of movement when we're doing visual medium because we're
Right.
so used to, like, even the act of painting. We think of the finished painting,
Yeah.
but I know from talking to mentors of mine that when you're painting, it's about the flow of how the painting and losing
Right.
your mind and just going with the feeling of it so you have the freedom to express. And so
Right.
I would say that the allegory is that in this moment of strife that we find ourselves in our collective, it could be this beautiful moment before catharsis where we're moving through some things, and the movement and the pressure that's causing the movement is part of the beauty of what is emerging. And so you can see that when you're doing a play, you can see that when you're doing dance, you can see that there's an evolution that's occurring, and there is truly no stasis. There is truly no. Everything is moving all the time,
Right.
and I also find it fascinating that the idea of dreams is something that I don't know most people that understand their dream. I was kind of wondering if you that moment where he said you can change the colors in the dream. I wonder what you think about the idea. Can we learn to change the elements in our collective dream that we're having?
Hmm. I think
Like,
that, yeah, I think we can. But I think that it depends on the individual. If the individual decides, I'm going to take more of an active role here,
mm-hmm,
I'm going to take action, basically, then yes, the dream can change. Because when you are, well, like when I study dream yoga, for instance, or what I call dream yoga with Tenzin Rinpoche, you can say at any instance, like I'm looking out right now at a seagull, actually, at this moment, very moment, I can say, this is a dream. This is a dream.
mm-hmm.
Well, tonight in my dream, I will see that moment and I will be
Oh,
shown what that moment really means on a deeper level.
wow.
So it's so deep and so connected, and I think the dream. I love dreams, and I think the dreams are, the capacity of people to dream and to learn from their dreams and to use their dreams in enriching their life and enriching the world is huge,
Mm-hmm.
and it should not be forgotten. And I guess that's one of the things that some people in the world are working on, like Robert Moss is a big dream shaman. He's working so hard on this. He's got dream ambassadors all over the world. Um, it's so important to have the dreams and to manifest the dreams. That's what I've done all my life, is manifesting the dreams. It's very important to manifest the dreams. If I have a dream at night and I think, oh my gosh, I've either got to paint it, I've got to
Mm-hmm.
see it produced, I've got to see it sung. And I don't have the capacity to do all my dreams because I have so many, but I do write them down, and I write little what I call a dream mandala. I do each year. It's called a
Uh-huh.
dream wheel. I've got 40 of them, 45 maybe, and on those wheels, I've got one or two lines that tells me about that dream. And 10 years sometimes later, I'll look at it and I'll say, I'm going to paint that dream. I'm going to make that dream manifested somehow.
Wow. Well, Don Miguel Ruiz writes in the Four Agreements about the collective dream that we share. And of
Yeah.
course, the Four Agreements is a spiritual book, but it's very practical because it really talks about the operating system of how we think and the kinds of assumptions that we're making about life, and how those stories that we tell ourselves tend to do violence to others and to ourselves. And so to frame the world as a dream and to understand that the stories we tell ourselves and how we understand or interpret those stories influences our actions. It
Oh, yes.
influences how we treat
Oh, yes.
others. It influences
Yes.
our body language towards others, which influences their opinion of us. And, as we were
Mm,
talking about on this energetic level, how we feel affects how we manifest. It affects what we're putting out there. You're having a crappy day, you miss the good things and you focus on the bad. You're having a great day. You brighten someone's day with a smile. It's just, it's causality in that sense. And so I think there's a very powerful idea about looking at your dreams with a sense of conscious awareness and deciding to look into them with a different way, because I think that influences our waking life too. And I
mm,
think even the most prolific of scientists in our world cultivated some sort of spiritual connection. Einstein and Tesla, and a lot of, I mean, you mentioned Bucky.
mm.
I've heard some stories. He seems to have had a very transcendent experience as well. I wonder if we could delve a little more into Bucky and your personal experience with him and his classes, but also if you care to comment on any other of the things that I was mentioning.
Well, there's so many things to think about in terms of, I mean, his mind was so vast and so connected to, we are not ourselves, we are not you, you are the cosmos. I always
Mm,
saw that as being so important because we are this greater thing. When you look out into space, you realize, oh my God, I'm part of that. Oh my gosh, I'm part of that. I mean, that's the feeling I get from him when I looking at what he writes, and he was so advanced in the way he thought of the world. And now today, 50 years later, people are looking at this and going, oh my gosh, he said that. I mean, when you look at the amount of things that he said that became true, at the time people said, no, no, that's impossible, but it became
right.
true.
Yeah.
It's
He
astounding.
dreamed the dream. He put it
He
out
was,
there, and then
no,
everybody, then the collective consciousness sort of eventually like soaked it in. The collective unconscious. Okay, I think we're
yeah.
telling ourselves too many bad dreams right now.
Well, I think we have to be very careful of that. I used to have a very good friend that was a yogi, and she did a special kind of yoga that was very advanced. And she used to say to me, and this was in the 80s, so it was a long time ago. She used to say to me, the really terrible thing these days is that children are getting attached to violence.
Yeah.
There's violent games, video games, and where they're killing each other. And she said that's very, very dangerous because it's sort of like they're feeding on that, right? And I think that's
Yeah.
happening. And I think that it's something that people have to be more aware of. You just can't put out those kinds of things to young people and think it's not going to have an effect in the world. And even the use of computers with artificial intelligence, apparently, so many of the young people that are maybe college age, or they're playing war games. And
Mm-hmm.
apparently the huge numbers, like I was astounded when I heard the numbers involved.
Mm-hmm.
And but those create this incredible energy that is not what we want in the world. We want to be able to have peace, and we're meant to have peace. And so there has to be more actions for peace. And I think that people can do that through their what they do, their own behavior in their life. In yoga, they call it ahimsa, nonviolence. It's nonviolent to yourself. You be kind to yourself, be kind to others. It's part of what is important in actions, in words, in everything we say. It's all so important. And when people reach that consciousness, that will be the dream when the dream really becomes what it should be.
It's like the world game that Bucky proposed. And I know one of the other projects delves into that a little bit, where it's like if there are so many people playing these games, the war games, and that's what we're rehearsing, that's the dress rehearsal that we're doing, couldn't we do the collaborative dress rehearsal? And I was watching with my son, we went to the theater and watched a new movie called Strange World. And there's this moment in the film where the grandson is trying to teach them to play this game that they're all into. And there's the dad and the grandpa. And the dad and the grandpa couldn't be more different. It's kind of this father-son story. And so they're sitting there and they're trying to play this game, and the demon spider comes out. They're like farming for resources. This kind of looks like, Settlers of Catan or whatever. And then both the dad and the grandpa are like, let's kill the demon spider. And he's like, no, you can't, that's not in the rules. You can't kill the demon. Well, let's kill it anyway. So they kill the demon spider. And then the next card that comes up is locust. And he's like, congratulations, we all lose because the demon spider was supposed to eat the locusts. And they said, well, but if we weren't supposed to kill the demon spider, then who's the bad guy? And he's like, you don't get it. There is no bad guy. Like, there's no bad guy. And everyone's like, huh? What? And then he says, then he gets really frustrated. And he finally looks at his dad and his grandpa and he says, okay, fine. If you want a bad guy, you guys are the bad guys. Because their mindset was so stuck in this, like, there has to be this conflict there. But the game was collaborative. Yeah. So it was very Bucky to have like a world game inside of this movie. And I was kind of smiling inside going, yeah, that's kind of where we're at. It's like it's taken this slow evolution in consciousness over the last 4 generations to kind of warm up to some of these fundamental shift in ideas. Even about, how to think in cooperation. I may have heard many authors say that you can't have a good story without conflict. The man who founded the Venus Project, he was writing about the fact that he wanted to produce a movie where they had a non-conflict driven story, and he had so much trouble when he went through the development of the writing of the story because it was just nearly impossible to create movement in a story arc without some sort of conflict. So he was trying to make a story where the world was harmonious and kind of like backcasting to what we want to live in, but it was like really difficult to break free from just the plot devices that everybody uses to create with. I mean, we're so accustomed to those things. They're ingrained.
Yeah, that really is meaningful for me because I created a Dodo Land, and it's a world that's peaceful and imaginative and creative, and there's no conflict in the story. And I had a tremendous difficult time with certain people who said, you just can't have this story and not have conflict. And I said, yes, you can. And so fortunately, a man from California decided in 1977 that he loved the story actually and wanted to produce it as a book. And he produced it as a large format book that was this big in 1977. It cost him $100,000 to do it.
Wow.
It had in 1977. It was 8 colors and unbelievable 50 pages. A beautiful book. It won the Printers Institute of America Award. It was so outstanding. But anyways, he decided, I'm going to publish this story. It doesn't have any conflict. It's all about peace. It's all about finding yourself. It's all about your individuality. It's about all these things. I'm going to publish it. And he did. And it was really encouraging for me. And it sort of set my life up, actually. It was just about the time I met Buckminster Fuller. So they sort of connected. And then I ended up working with that story with a group in New York who decided they wanted to share this message of become yourself, become who you are, become your individuality.
Yeah.
And and they produced it in Harlem, and it went to every child in Harlem. The story of Dodo Land got produced. I was able to fly in from Toronto to see the production many times, um, hundreds of times, I guess. But anyways, so
Wow.
that was kind of fun. And then it was chosen by another. There's these enlightened individuals that come in your life, and this man was enlightened, and he was Don Goddard, who was part of a program in Western Canada that was having artists and having musicians and having storekeepers and learn about the internet. And this was 19, it was 19, I guess actually, what year was that? 95, 94. And he chose Dodoland as the story to use.
Wow.
And it became a site on the internet. And at that time, there was hardly any color on the internet. I said, it has to be in color. And so it became in color. It became a hit immediately.
Wow.
And I think it's had millions of hits, this website that is now
Wow.
Total Land Online. But there you go. I mean, it can happen. You could create these beautiful things, and they can be embraced because people really do want this.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
want
I mean,
this.
it's, and, it strikes me that when preschoolers watch television, because I have
Right,
a preschooler and I have an elementary school 10-year-old right now.
right,
And when they do children's television for preschoolers, there really is no conflict. I mean, if you look at
right,
Cocomelon, it's babies sitting around playing, singing nursery rhymes.
right,
And toddlers love it. And then the moment you put in conflict, it creates distress.
right.
And I think there's something about the philological human development where we all kind of go through the phases of human evolution. Dr. Harvey Karp talks about that, where, sort of like you go through your caveman stage, then you become a villager, and then you sort of go through these different stages of evolution. So by the time my son reaches middle elementary school, then he's kind of in this rules phase where everything's, it's about fairness, and that's not fair, this is. And so it's just natural for humans to go through
Mhm.
this evolution. However, many humans get stuck in a
Right,
certain place. And
right.
so I think we're sort of meant to evolve through that. And I think
Mhm.
collectively as humanity, we're evolving through that. It reminds me of one of the offshoots of Design Science Studio, I believe it's called World Weavers. There's a group that meets called World Weavers. And what they do is they write stories for the purpose of envisioning the future that we want to live in. So in other words, what would that future look like? What would it feel
Right,
like? How
right.
would people get around? All those things, and you write stories around that
Mm,
for the
mhm,
purpose of
mhm.
dreaming the dream that you want to
Right,
inhabit. And I find that,
right.
just like Star Trek, just like we have video phones now, the Jetsons, these fictions tend to color our reality. I mean, the Matrix, is very much a part of the pop culture now. Not that those ideas didn't exist before, but when people have that in front of them visually, artistically, those tend to seep into our consciousness, and eventually we're going to
Mhm.
find a way to create that. We have all these stories about rogue AI robot androids, and look at the future we're trying to create right now. I mean, we need a better
Right,
story. And so I
right.
think that does start with the children. I think that does
Mhm,
start at that early age, and also letting that permeate in a way that can grow with the adults in the life, with the communities. And you're right, there's too much focus on violence, on conflict, on what's wrong, on what. So art brings the beauty in the world, and art helps to expose the contrast of where
mhm,
there isn't beauty,
mhm.
and how to move through that, and how to cope with that.
Absolutely. Yeah, one of the activities that I've got in the guide is called making a picture book, an environmental picture book. And I've done this with hundreds of children, actually. And basically, it goes into creating your own environmental hero or heroine.
Hmm.
And then once they create their own environment, and they can make their environmental hero or heroine human or animal or bird or whatever, or combination or anything they want. It's totally imaginative. and then they create a world for that environmental hero, and like what kind of environment does it live in, and they include nature, certain kind of mountains, but it can be imaginary, and then certain kind of water and certain kind of um, houses that are unusual or different. And once they've created the world, then I have them write the story of solving some problem that there is in the world. And they write beautiful stories about protecting the animals, protecting the water, protecting the air, and it's quite wonderful. And then sometimes they have what we've done is have um, book events where they actually have young author events where they show their books and they share their books with stories. Sometimes do plays and things like that. But I think part of the process is let's create these imaginary worlds, and then there might be a chance they can manifest in some way too, because young children, their imaginations are wild and wonderful. Why not use that instead? Thinking of good things, good
Yes.
stories, good characters, good ways of dealing with problems. And sometimes the children that I've worked with have done special dream work with, whether they actually include their dreams in the stories as well.
When you mention writing your own hero, it reminds me of a journal exercise I was given. And I forget exactly the prompt, but I think you were supposed to figure out how you use certain aspects of yourself to become who you needed to be in the world. And
Mm-hmm.
it was interesting because mine ended up being the common thread for me was that I am kind. And,
Mm-hmm.
I think the themes in the prompt had to do with creating change and things like that. And it was so neat to come to that inner knowledge of how I serve in the world and what I have to give uniquely. And I think
Right.
that's just it. I think you mentioned some of the conflict that people experience while they're growing up. It has a large part to do with the fact that our society currently expects people to fit in a certain way. And I don't think it always usually utilizes people as they really are meant to be in the world. And there becomes this inner battle of like, but I have to find this job, or I have to fit in this way in the community. And that's
Mm-hmm.
what I love about artists, is I feel like the artist community is very much like, you are who you are and we accept you
Mm-hmm.
how you are. And I think that's a very heart-centered way to live.
Right. Yes, of course. And that was the theme of Dodo Land, be what you want to be. And
Beautiful.
they had a special magic hat to wear. I call it the bird hat, that they wore to remember who they were, what was their imaginary being that was special and
Wow.
was different. And in New York, I'd go into a performance with like 1,000 children in the audience, and they'd all have their hats on.
I love
Very
that.
happy.
Remember who you are. That's my
Remember who
favorite
you
line
are.
from a movie. Like, The Lion King is my all-time favorite movie because of when Mufasa tells Simba, "Remember who you are."
Right.
It like resonated with
Yes.
me as a message. And
Yes.
all of a sudden it was
Yes.
like that Bucky moment. Like you said, I am one with the universe. All of a
Right.
sudden it's like, wait a minute, like I actually remember stuff. I remember how to do stuff. I remember there's so much more that I know than I learned in this lifetime. And there's
Right.
access to, like you said, Bucky had access to this vast libraries of knowledge. And I think it's really
Right.
important that we start to open up to that and we start to become
Absolutely.
curious about the
Hmm.
possibility of that. I think, once we start dreaming together, I think there's more things that can happen, more things that can emerge. And
Yes.
when you were sitting there and Bucky disappeared, and the and he was just energy. What was that class? What was he teaching, and what did you learn from him?
Well, that was him speaking at the Humanistic Psychology Conference well, actually, it was an event in Los Angeles, a big event in 1970s in Los Angeles. So when he was speaking and he disappeared and became light, um, I realized, yes, we are light. We are part of the cosmos. This man is tapped into it.
Yes.
But we all are that.
And you can too.
And you can too.
Yeah.
Yes.
I really want people to go check out Dodoland. So can you tell me the domain name? What is that website for people to go check out?
It's called Dodoland, and it's just www.dodoland.com.
Okay, yeah, go check that out. You can find the movie that
please
was
go
made
there.
with Stroopy. And Della Burford, you also have a blog online, and we'll link that in the show notes as well. Do you have any closing thoughts? Anything that you really want to share with the listeners of the community?
Well, I think it's most important that everybody, realizes their individuality. They express their individuality in their arts. Art can be very powerful. My life is an example of that. And don't be afraid of sharing your art and joining with other artists and sharing that. And if you're in the audience and you're enjoying it, you're part of it too. Let's create. Creating a world that is beautiful and peaceful and wonderful can so much be part of creating the arts and allowing the arts to come through and making it beautiful, because our world is beautiful. I was told in a dream, and I included it actually in the book because it came to me in a dream, that the world is one and beautiful. And I was told that in a dream, just a loudspeaker. The world is one and beautiful. And so I put that at the back of Earth Action. And I think that's the message I would leave people. The world is one and beautiful.
Amazing. Della Burford, thanks for being my guest on the Spaceship Earth Mission Log and for sharing your beautiful mission with us, your books, your prolific artwork, and people can look you up in the show notes. People can reach out to you if they're part of the space camp. They got your email. And please collaborate. Please find out about each other. So, I love the example of how every time you go to space camp, you update your knowledge of what you're going to share through your art. And so that's how important this is. And so, Della, thank you for being a part of this. And thank you for your beingness and your doing through your art. I really am grateful to meet you.
That's wonderful. I'm grateful to meet you too.